Welcome to another episode of Red and Black, where your conservatism is not just the color that you used to. I'm Lenny McAllister, and I'm trying to figure out how I want to start this episode, what story to start with first. Should I start with the simply stupid or the strategically stupid? Because it's been a pretty full week of really stupid things that have been said and been done, and I can't determine it on my own, so I'm just going to go to my three wonderful guest co-hosts, etc., for the week in the show and everything else, and I'm going to ask them and let them pick. Starting with the lady here, AJ Swinson. Thank you for joining us as a guest host today. Ladies first, what do you think? Do you think I should go with the simply stupid, where we're talking about just everyday people doing really dumb things, or strategically stupid, where people that are paid to be really smart do really dumb things?
Well, I think that the people that are paid to be smart option is just so common. You know, so let's just do like everyday stupid. People don't talk about that enough, I think. I can get down with that. I can rock that, even though I will say, everyday stupid, TikTok and Instagram's just sitting right there, right up that alley. And then and it also makes it seem as though if you haven't seen a whole lot of everyday stupid nowadays, you haven't been on Facebook in a while, apparently. So, but I will take your feelings into consideration. Jeff, this is your guest. I don't want to embarrass you in front of your guest.
Too late.
Yeah, that's true too. You all didn't see before we started. Jeff, Charles.
That's me.
Swab extraordinaire. A fresh perspective, a fresh haircut, etc., etc. Simply stupid or strategically stupid? Everyday stupid people or paid to be smart but really end up doing dumb things stupid? Which one should we do first?
Well, you know, being that a lot of my life is on Twitter, I see a lot of everyday stupid. So I'm good with going with that. I don't do Facebook a lot. I started to get into Instagram. There's less stupid on Instagram, but on Twitter, that is a cesspool of everyday stupid. So we can start there.
Well, Instagram, because everybody's gorgeous on Instagram. Everybody got the pretty eyes and the good hair, and everybody's like a size 2 if you're a woman, or you're super buff if you're a dude. It's called filters, everybody. I don't know if people have figured that out yet. Everybody's gorgeous for a reason on Instagram. You know, there's a show on MTV called Catfish that is the anti-Instagram of it all. So just put it out there. Don't buy the filters. Don't believe the hype.
I've heard about that show. Yeah. I've never watched it though.
Well, I've heard about it, and thank God. Look, I could not be single during this era, because between catfishing and filters on Instagram, I feel like, do y'all remember I'm Gonna Get You Sucker, where one of the Wayland sisters took off all the appendages when they were walking down? Remember that? Yes, that's what it's like in today's America.
That's classic.
True.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's like. It's like, hold on, let me take this filter off and let me do this and let me pop these. I mean, heck, it used to be the contact lenses back in the day. Now it's just everything. AJ Swinson, by the way, everybody, is like, Jeff told me these people were calm.
I
wouldn't lie to her like that.
He said, look, Lenny gets a little animated, but it's usually towards the end of the show. He lied to you, sister. Dr. Metzler, simply stupid or strategically stupid from smart people, supposedly, allegedly, that, by the way, are paid by taxpayer dollars? Stupid.
Well, I frankly don't see the difference, because a lot of the people who are paid to be smart and strategic are in fact stupid. But let's go with simply stupid. Okay,
so we have a unanimous choice of simply stupid, so I probably should do the opposite, but no, I'm going to go with what you all are saying, because I value you all's opinion like I value their opinion out there that are watching Red and Black. Let me throw this out there. I don't know if you all heard this story or not. This is more cultural awareness than political analysis, so we'll start there first. Have you all heard the story that centers around author Frederick Joseph, where long and short of it, he's walking his dog with his girlfriend, fiance, wife, whoever, and a lady comes up and tells them to allegedly, supposedly take their dog and themselves, quote unquote, back to the hood, which of course then prompts him to do what every superhero in the 21st century does these days when they're accosted by evil. You're right. Yeah, pull out a cell phone.
Yeah.
And start recording the episode And then the other bastion of superheroes come into play. It's called the Twitter Warriors. And then they go look for your job and your picture and they match it together. And they do this thing called doxing, which made somebody very, very famous back in the day. We will not mention her name because we're not allowed on this show. And this lady ended up losing her job. Now, people are saying the woman that made the comment seemed like she was drunk. Should she have really lost her job over this? But I don't want to go into the specifics of the situation per se. And I'm going to start with you, Jeff, first, because you said you spend a lot of time on Twitter and thus you're pretty immersed in, Simply Stupid. But, I know we probably have gone too far with this. I'm going to make you pay with your life when you do something stupid thing. But I mean, this just seems to be another example of you can't make a mistake in modern America, which as a Christian, I say, wasn't the whole purpose of Christianity to be able to say, I can make a mistake today and make up for it tomorrow? It's like, to me, this is a satanic society because you can't make a mistake without basically paying for your life with it.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that. I recently wrote an article for Liberty Nation talking about how wokeness is a form of religion, but the way it differs from all the major religions like Christianity, Islam, and Judaism is that in the wokeism religion, there is no such thing as redemption. They don't have that concept. So if you transgress, or even if you transgressed a long time ago, they've got to cancel you and destroy you. Now, I didn't get to watch the footage of the whole thing, but I read about it. And people were bringing up the fact that, well, I mean, actions have consequences, right? I mean, free speech, it doesn't protect you from the consequences of your actions. And I do agree with that. However, when it gets to the point where you're doxing somebody, now you could be putting their life in danger. That's my problem with it. I mean, I don't have to like the person to acknowledge that they shouldn't be killed for saying something stupid. I mean, what she said was apparently racist and whatever, but...
And she gave the finger, Jeff. She gave the finger. Don't leave
that out. She gave
the
finger, yes. But there was a time when, giving the finger wouldn't automatically place you in danger. I'm sure a lot of people have died over the middle finger, but still, like, putting people's information out there like that, to me, that's not the way to go, especially when you know that even if she had said something less offensive, that same thing could still happen, because you can say something that isn't all that offensive and they'll use it against you. So I think it just kind of shows where our society has gone, especially the fact that we all have cameras in our hands right now. That has kind of changed who we are a little bit. And it kind of concerns me because I can see where this could go even further.
AJ, it's the same month where we celebrated the 20-year anniversary of 9/11, where everybody actually felt for each other as Americans 20 years ago. We barely got through that remembrance, and we're right back to sticking cameras in each other's faces and treating each other this way, whether it's the go back to the hood, which is the 21st century version of go back to Africa, or it's the you did something stupid, so I'm going to try to ruin you for the next 50 years of your life. What the heck's going on here?
Well, I think one of the commentators or the comments underneath that post basically said that if someone, saying something rude to you, if you can immediately get them fired, who has the power, them or you? And so I think it's an interesting way that the power structure in America is changing, where African Americans feel that now they can, I would say African American leftists feel that they can alter the power structure of the past. So in the past, you could accuse a Black man of doing something minute. Maybe he did do it, maybe he didn't, and he'd be punished whether it actually happened or not, whether it was bad or not. If he did something that, was against what they thought Black people should be doing, they could immediately be punished. So now it's like that power structure is kind of on its head. And Black people on the left feel that now they can use their race as a position of power against and kind of weaponize that in the same way. They want people to be fired. They want people to be punished. They want them to be publicly mocked. So it's not lynching, but it is to a certain degree. It's a way of punishing them in the public square. And it just seems like you're weaponizing the racial divisiveness that we have going on.
Dr. Metzler, what ended up happening to We Just Want Equality? It's and this may be controversial, but I remember a period of time, and we've seen this with other, let me put it like this. We've seen this with other quote unquote minority groups or underrepresented groups, where the first item that's put out there is, I just want equality. I just want to use whatever tools, whatever platform I have to make sure that my group, as a minority, as an underrepresented population, is treated equally. And then all of a sudden it becomes no, I don't want to be treated equally anymore. I want the power. I'm going to pound you into the sand for past transgressions 10 years ago, 30 years ago, 50 years ago, whether it's racial or otherwise. This seems to be where we're going with this now. It's not a matter of, I'm going to use this tool of my cell phone in my pocket to capture what we've been talking about for years. It's no. I'm going to make you pay for 5 generations of white people lying on black people. And since you tried it on me, I'm going to make sure that you never, ever forget it again. And I'm going to leave you with this scar. That's not healing. And that doesn't seem to be leading towards equality. That's vengeance. And vengeance is in the Lord.
Yeah, it is. It is, in fact, vengeance, but it's also, remember, there's money in them their videos. Because from the standpoint of being able to have the power to sue for emotional upset, emotional distress, etc., you certainly have that power. I'm not sure, though, that I would relegate that exclusively to African Americans on the left. I believe it's across the broad political spectrum that weaponizing cell phone videos, etc., have in fact become a part of the culture.
Well, but let me take a step back for just a second. It's certainly becoming a part of the culture, but in one sense, to AJ's point, Jeff, it has become something that has been weaponized. It becomes a tool. It becomes a threat, and it becomes something that is much more than just trying to level the playing field, I think, with this. And then on top of this one, if you look at the the Fred Joseph situation, Jeff, you end up having a guy that's in a position of power. This is not what it used to be, which was lowly black man, or case in point, the Walter Scott shooting. Black man's running from the police is in a position of power, the police lies, and there's somebody from the lower class that's recording another person from the lower class being lied on. Frederick Joseph is a well-known author. He already had a position of power. He knew exactly what was going to happen if his video got out there.
Right.
It was not kind of evening the playing field. It's like, I already have a position of power over you. I'm just going to use it and amplify that by 100 and prove a point.
Well, and there's a couple things about this that I don't like. I mean, first off, that's the kind of thing that I think a lot of black people are encouraged to do because it makes them feel good. Not all of us, but it just makes it feel like, oh yeah, we got one over on Whitey. Okay, police brutality is still a thing. I mean, there are other areas where Democrat policies and just policies in general are keeping black people in conditions that they don't deserve to live in. That's not going to solve any kind of societal ill. Nothing about that is going to make people less racist. This stuff is still going to happen. Right. The second thing that bothers me about this, and this doesn't just apply to black people, this applies to everybody. This is part and parcel of how we become so mentally weak as individuals and as a nation. Like if this would have happened 10, 15 years ago, which it did happen. I mean, I've been called, certain racial epithets or whatever. You either say something back or you walk away or you ignore them or you just realize that that person's a moron and that their opinions of you aren't worth anything. And we were mentally tough enough to not have to get full on revenge like that. I mean, of course, sometimes it would result in fistfights, but that was about the extent of it. Like nobody's lives were going to be destroyed. And I think that what's dangerous about this is that the weaker that we get, the more immature we are and the more lives will be ruined. I mean, I don't know who this lady was. For all I know, maybe she had a bad day. Maybe she was drunk. Doesn't excuse what she said. But again, there was no way for her to actually apologize for what she did. So I'm not really down with this whole camera thing. There are certain cases where I get it, like the situation in in Central Park in New York, where that lady called the police, was calling the police on the guy. Yeah, because that could have got him killed. So I get that,
Right.
but you don't need to pull out the phone just because you're having a verbal altercation with somebody. That's not even going to impact your life.
And I appreciate that, Jeff, and where you're saying, but AJ, what about the power dynamic in this? Usually the phone is the equalizer to put people on equal footing. Frederick Joseph was already a step above where this woman was in regards to status, notoriety, affluence in society, etc. It just was something that kind of hammered home the point. It was almost like saying, I mean, look, it's the old axiom that Black folks say, I wish you would. You caught the wrong one today. I mean, that's kind of what transpired, right? It was almost like he said, oh, you're going to say, go back to the hood. You caught the wrong one today, took the video, and we're not trying to bring about justice. We're trying to make a statement, which is not quite the same thing in many instances.
Right. So I think first, you know, a part of having character and integrity is what I would say to a person when no one is watching is the same thing I would say when a million people are watching. So clearly this woman had no character and no integrity, and she was exposed for that. This company, them saying, okay, we don't want someone who has character and integrity working for us. I can understand that to a certain degree, but as far as Frederick Joseph wanting her, kind of egging it on, wanting this retribution, that's what I'm not sure about. That's what separates the current movement for, you know, civil rights from Martin Luther King and movements of the past, where, you know, Martin Luther King and James Baldwin, they understood that white people who are racist, they are partially victims too. Like their actions are hurting themselves, they're hurting their community. Like there was a certain level of understanding of humanity that they were caught up in a system too that was you know, I don't know exactly how to say it, but just that they understood the humanity of the other person and didn't necessarily want them to fail. So I think that's what's different here. And as far as the power dynamic, what's interesting about this is that no matter what, whether even if this woman, apparently she had a good job at a big company, but even if this woman was poor, even if she had one leg, even if she was blind in one eye, the fact that Frederick Joseph is Black, it doesn't matter what other circumstances she had, she would always, according to the paradigm of the left, she would always be seen as more powerful. So I think that's what's interesting about this. It doesn't matter if he was the richest man in the world, he's Black. Therefore, he's less powerful than a white woman. Even if she were a one-legged, blind, you know, whatever issue she may have had, if she had no money, no, you know, connections, nothing. That's the issue with the conversation we're having around privilege and status and wealth right now. And that's partially why he can claim to be a victim to this degree. Because technically, no matter what he does, she'll always have more power than him in America.
So hold on. Let me ask this question though, Dr. Metzler, and you all can chime in on this, but I'm going to ask Dr. Metzler this first before we move on. Is this, because we got a lot of stupid to talk about, is this a natural evolution of the civil rights movement? I mean, look, after Dr. King was shot, and AJ brought up Dr. King, after 68, Black folks were like, screw it. You shot Medgar Evers, you shot Malcolm X, you shot Dr. King. I mean, this dude just got hit upside the head with bricks in Chicago just a couple of years ago. He's all about nonviolence, and you still shot him down like a dog. You shot Malcolm X, you shot all these other people, you've lynched people, forget it, I'm done. And it became more volatile, Black Panthers, etc. We're 50 years down the path from that. Is this a natural evolution of where civil rights and the struggle for civil rights and equality for Black people is? It's just, okay, look, we're done trying to do the equality thing. We're going to go get revenge now? Or is this just a bastardization of the civil rights movement where people are both looking for equality, but now some people have hijacked that movement and are now taking their own personal feelings out through this venue?
Well, as it relates to what is called civil rights these days, and what civil rights was, I don't think it's a natural evolution. In fact, I think it is a perversion of, if you look at civil rights, it was never intended to be in this way, and it is actually a perverted version of civil rights. It is not natural. There's nothing natural about the evolution here. What has happened is we have taken civil rights. If you look at the tenets of the movement, if you look at the law itself, this was never ever the intention. Instead, what we have now is this artificial, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. Let me take this. How many clicks do I have? This has very little, if anything, to do with civil rights and any trajectory of civil rights.
Well, does that mean that, I'm going to push back a little bit on it and then open it up to the other two. Does that mean that this has gone from, civil rights and influencing politics to the cover of civil rights, but influencing public relations and somewhat politics? Whereas maybe 50 years ago, it was driven by the civics and then it had its tentacles elsewhere. But now it's kind of flipped on its head where it's tentacles elsewhere trying to drive what should be the foundation. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And as it relates to civics is out of the conversation anyway, because civics hasn't been taught in school so long. So who even knows what civics are? And so all of these so-called, purveyors of wokeism have in fact taken all of this and turned it into what they believe is now their property, what they own, their rights, all of these kinds of things. Frankly, it's an embarrassment and it's a joke.
All right, so I'm gonna go to the younger people on this show today, the cool kids, if you will. Agree and disagree with what Dr. Metzler's saying?
Ladies first.
Oh, you love ladies first. Go ahead, AJ. He's trying to impress you. Why are you acting different? Because we got company. Why are you acting different? Go ahead, AJ.
I think that to a certain degree, it's building on it to a certain degree. The way that the civil rights movement started was nonviolent, but it also had a large strain, even during Martin Luther King's life, of anger. When you see Kwame Ture or Stokely Carmichael, how he went from marching with Martin Luther King to pushing Martin Luther King towards the Black Power movement, towards, not allowing white people to march in equal capacity, and that anger, that vitriol, wanting Black Power and wanting to take over. You saw that happening while Martin Luther King was alive. What happened was when leaders, you mentioned Malcolm X. I'm pretty sure Malcolm X was killed by some of the Nation of Islam, but Malcolm X, after he went to Mecca, came back, understanding that hating white people wasn't helpful, and that if you look at an international aspect of that, is that many of his brothers and sisters in Islam were Caucasian, were white skinned or light skinned or whatever. So he came back with a new perspective on that many others around him didn't have. So I think that was something that was happening when Martin Luther King was alive, when Malcolm X was alive. It was an anger and a vitriol that instead of, us fighting for something that's productive, like Black-owned businesses, Black capitalism, Black advancement, education, it became, tear down, the white patriarch, whatever, tear down the system, build it back up. And I think it actually moved Martin Luther King in a bit more progressive area as well, where he started saying, we need to reconstruct America as well. So he didn't take on their anger, but he did take on some of their, requests for bigger government, etc. So I don't think it's their deaths were causes of this. I think it was already something that was in the water, and it just took fire and continued on.
So let me ask you. Let me ask you this, cool kid with the cool hair. If she's right and he's right, is what we're seeing right now more anger or just lack of direction in regards to what people actually want? If you have lack of direction, you're just kind of a little bit of everywhere and doing a little bit of anything. If you're just letting the anger drive you, then you don't really care where you're going. because you know that it's just being driven by the anger? Which one do you think it is right now?
I think it's more of a distraction. I think that's what we're seeing. I'm going to piggyback off of what AJ was saying about, we should be focusing on strengthening Black businesses, Black families, all this important stuff. What do they have us doing? They have us protesting for voting rights that we already have. A lot of this stuff is trying to distract us from what we really should be focusing on. Malcolm X, when he gave the ballot or the bullet speech, he talked about, you complain about Black businesses not succeeding, but you're not spending your dollars with Black-owned businesses. We're not building, and we should be. Well, I shouldn't say that, because we are building in a lot of different ways. But we could be building even more if we weren't distracted by these sideshows that they put up for us. Like, again, voting rights. We literally have the right to vote. It's already been shown that a lot of these laws that they complain about don't prevent Black people from voting. Black turnout was higher last year than it had been in a long time.
Yeah, but Jeff, when you get rid of souls to the polls, we're not talking about a bunch of white old Catholics that are the souls to the polls going to the polls on a Sunday.
Yeah, so, but realistically, Lenny, we know that that's not going to keep Black people from voting. We're not going to see Black voter turnout go down. I'm not saying I agree with it, but I'm just saying realistically, we're not fighting Jim Crow 2.0 here.
No,
we should be focusing on building. We should be focusing on getting rid of government policies that make things harder for us. We can already vote, but what about other policies that result in crappy education? Crime on the streets. I mean, these people want to defund the police, even though that puts more Black people in danger. So and the sad thing is that a lot of these people do think that they're part of a civil rights movement that is on the same level as what we were doing in the 60s. And the truth is, we're not. And we need to be focused on things that will actually move us forward, not on these sideshow issues that are just designed to make us angry at the white man or whomever else.
But if we're focusing on those things, Jeff, if those in fact are the things that we're focusing on, what's sexy about that for us to post on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook? Where's the sexiness in that? So it becomes, there is, and I think you're right, but having a conversation about building, and you're 100% right, that should be the focus. But we have bought into the propaganda that this is what we need to focus on. And rather than saying, wait, that doesn't make sense, we're like, yeah, because I'm on the start. Look, I'm gonna make this go viral. Look how many likes I'm gonna get.
Yeah, but
and I'm an internet star.
Hold on. Let me throw this out there, because I still want to get to the other stupid, because we got to talk about Afghanistan and the hearings. We got to talk about
There's a lot of stupid.
We got to talk about charging people to be citizens, which, anywho, I'll get to that in a second. But you brought up something, Dr. Metzler, that I want to throw out there very quickly, which is making these type of issues that Jeff brought up and AJ brought up actually sexy. Guess what we made sexy 15 years ago that nobody on this show, and dare I say the vast majority of Black America 20 years ago, thought would ever happen? The idea that a Black man could actually be elected president of the United States of America. But I mean, again, I go back to the Eddie Murphy routine in the 1980s. He was imitating Jesse Jackson in his inaugural speech, and he was basically running around stage trying to duck assassins' bullets in the inauguration speech. Anybody that saw the routine remembers it. In America, elected a Black dude from the south side of Chicago with a Muslim name that lived in Indonesia for part of his life. So, and we made it sexy. It was cool to vote for this dude. So if we could do it with something that we thought would never happen, a first-year U.S. senator with a weird name that people couldn't pronounce, why can't we make these other things sexy on the same social media that helped Barack Obama get elected?
Well, we can't do that because we are of the mindset that that is not interesting. We can't do that because we're of the mindset that, so how can I make that work for me? How can it? And look, and plus, as Jeff was talking about building Black businesses, et cetera, entrepreneurship, those kinds of things, how so many of us simply don't even understand what that is and how that functions. How are we going to make it sexy?
You know, one thing I will say, there is a positive sign here. I am seeing a lot of Black people on social media talking about, hey, I'm building this business, or talking about how Black people need to be building businesses. So I think that's starting to change. I hope that trend continues, because it is sexy when I see them out there like, yeah, I'm out here hustling.
Absolutely.
I'm out here doing this. I've got this hustle going on. And not even just businesses. I see them talking about, families, Black men and Black women. I mean, that's all important. So I'm hoping that this thing blows up.
And I think too, if we see more leadership around this, if you thought of, I was having a conversation with someone about reparations, and not to get on a side topic, but I was just saying, even if they were to say, okay, we'll do it today, you would have no idea who gets it. You would have no agreement on what people get. It would be a mad scramble to figure and throw something out at one in the last minute, type of meet. I don't even know how you would pull that off. So it's like there's a lack of leadership in the African American community, and there's a lack of consensus on core goals, on what is needed, on what should be focused on. So I think if you had that leadership, then you would be able to move forward more cohesively with the same goals. And you can say, oh, nobody does that. Well, that's really not true. I mean, every president, you see an Asian delegation going into the White House and getting an executive order every, 4 to 8 years. And Asian people don't even vote. So I think if you had that kind of leadership.
Hold on, AJ, and I'm going to scrap one of the stupid things, because we can talk about Hannity another time, because you bring up something interesting. But Asian Americans, they're smaller as far as the population. They own a lot of businesses, and when you own a lot of businesses, you have a lot of capital. When you have a lot of capital, you can spend money on elections. You can influence things. So they are involved in that. But as well, I mean, you can make the argument the Latino community is not monolithic. We hear this all the time. We're celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month right now, and they will tell you all the time, Cubans are not the same as Mexicans, and I'm not from Puerto Rico. And they will make it a point to tell you that we don't vote the same. We don't have the same interest in many regards. We have our own conflicts, etc. So, some of the conversation around Black people needs a certain type of leadership that's coalescing around one agenda. I would argue, and I'm throwing it out to the three of you, that perhaps that's what holds us back in some instances, because there's this thought that we have to have one set of goals. If the goal is better education, why can't one set be pushing for school choice with charter schools, another set be pushing for better public schools, another set be pushing for tax credit scholarship programs? If we're talking about economic development, why can't one be doing public-private partnership? Why can't another one be purely private investors and huge capitalists? Why can't a third be trying to do something from a government sector perspective? Are we taking wrong approaches, thinking that we have to do it a way that might be outdated by 3 generations?
Well, I just want to say, I'm not saying that we should have one agenda. I mean, I think if you, like you said, no community is monolithic, and they're going to disagree on different aspects of things. But when you guys agree on the basics and the social mores, then you can push certain things. There's no doubt as to whether we can come together on the most important things. Like with education, even if you disagree on certain parts, we're not going to work against each other on things when we all know that education is a priority. Yet you see African Americans working against the school choice community and reverse. When it's like, if we're saying all of our goals, if education is a more of our community, if this is a priority, then why are we working against each other or part of other people's agendas? So I think that's what I'm saying. We have to get to a consensus where even if we disagree on how we're doing it, as long as we know the other people are working towards the same goal, we can do that. And that's where that lack is. The leadership that we have isn't seeking to unite us based on what we have in common and what goals we have in common. They're working for parties, they're working for business interests. And if you listen to people like Dr. Claude Anderson, he talked about how we should be focusing on community and on building economic capital before we're focusing on voting. None of that stuff matters if you're not together as a group, if you can't open your business and make money. So it's just the prioritization that I'm talking about, and how we're working against ourselves for other people's agendas because we don't have leadership and because we don't have the same goals and mores in common.
Quick,
Yeah,
Dr.
I do.
Metzler first.
Okay.
Yeah, a couple of things about that. One, I think from a leadership standpoint, until we get rid of this notion of crabs in a barrel, none of this is going to work. There are too many of us who believe and actively engage in this behavior of there is only one spot at the top. If I have that spot, I am not going to help you get there. And it is why other groups, you take Jews, for example, I don't have to like you. This is about business. This is about the community. Instead, we are spending so much time. I ain't messing with her. She stole my man. Or whatever the situation is. And until we get rid of that, and I also think that when we're looking at leaders, I think it's time for us to look at growing a new generation of leaders. Those leaders that are beholden to the good of the community, not the good of the party, not the good of the corporations. And I think that's the big challenge here.
Well, let's get to Jeff real quick before we transition. And by the way, that whole crabs in a barrel thing that you were talking about, Dr. Metzler, that's the reason why I usually don't have Jeff on screen, even when I need him to talk. For stuff like that. He's too good looking. He makes me look bad, and he's smarter than me. So, Jeff, fire away. Here's your close-up.
Well, I mean, as far as making you look bad, I don't have to try very hard for that. I mean, you kind of do it for me. So you're throwing me off track.
Go ahead.
But this conversation, it actually reminds me, I was listening to the Aquarian Anarchy podcast, and they had King Randall on. And if for people who aren't familiar with King Randall, really quick, he has an organization called the X for Boys. And he's in Albany, Georgia. And what he does is he takes Black boys specifically, especially ones who have been through the juvenile system, or maybe they're having a hard time. And he has a whole school training program. He's bought land to be able to train them how to change oil, how to shoot, how to fish, how to cook, how to garden, all the stuff that really any man needs to know about, but especially for Black men. And he was talking about how people in his community, especially like the faith leaders, 50 years old and up, the pastors of the churches who aren't doing anything in the community, how they don't like him. Because in my opinion, it's because he's doing what they should have been doing for years, but they didn't. Albany is a destitute city, and he's trying to fix that. But when he was on the Roland Martin show, it was interesting, that conversation, because King Randall was talking about how, he wasn't saying that voting isn't important, but for him, it was more of a priority to just do the work in his community, because you don't necessarily need the government to intervene in all this and to fix everything. And it was interesting because the Roland Martin, he really couldn't seem to even understand the concept of doing something outside of the government being involved. Right. We need more examples like King Randall, because he's out there doing the work. And I know there are a lot of other people out there doing the same thing, but he's not waiting for the government to get it together. He's not waiting for reparations to come. He's not waiting for the government to stop being racist. He's just saying, look, let's build regardless of what the government's doing. Same thing that Malcolm X was preaching, by the way.
So let me go ahead and transition on to strategically stupid. We had hearings about what transpired in Afghanistan happened earlier this week. And Dr. Metzler, I'm gonna start with you. The more we hear about what transpired earlier this year, the more we're reminded that President Biden, when he was Senator Biden and when he was Vice President Biden, had major international and foreign affairs gaffes that had consequences. People forget that he was supposed to negotiate the deal with the Iraqis. That fell through. We pulled out our troops in 2011, and we had ISIS less than 3 years later. We have seen other gaffes where he said he was on the right side of history when in fact he was on the wrong side of history. Now he's commander in chief, and here we sit with this hearing and hearing about the blunders that transpired with how everything went down when Afghanistan fell. What are we to make of this, and what are we about to make with where we're going moving forward if we're having these type of mistakes from somebody that's been in Washington, D.C. since the year I was born, literally?
Well, first of all, let's start with the defense secretary. I happen to know Lloyd from previous work. And when I said, when Lloyd was nominated to be the defense secretary, I said he should not be defense secretary. You are simply choosing him because he's Black. I was called everything but a child of God. Look, he's not ready to be defense secretary. There were too many blunders in this case. In fact, if he were the right person to be defense secretary, when Biden said to him, what needs to be done here, I'm not going to follow your order. At that point, he should have resigned, which he did not. And so as it relates to foreign policy, neither Biden or anyone in his camp has any idea what's going on. Susan Rice is head of domestic policy in the Obama administration. She was national security advisor. You mean to tell me she couldn't do anything relative to this ridiculous no planning? You mean to tell me that Anita Dunn, who is his whisperer, she couldn't do anything about it as well? Look, the bottom line is he is going to have to end up sending troops back into Afghanistan. There is no question about it. We cannot, Al-Qaeda is there. We know that, in fact, ISIS is there. We know all of these things. How are we going to get intelligence about what they're doing, not only to harm us, but to harm our allies across the globe?
Jeff, when you were watching that, all this transpired this week and the answers that were given and I hate to say it like this, but the examination and cross-examination, because we know that a lot of this ended up being partisan, but there were still elements of truth, even if it was a partisan cross-examination. What were you taking out of this as you watched this unfold?
You know, it just further illustrated how inept this administration was when it came to doing the withdrawal. And I've been saying over and over again, you know, when this first started, I wanted to defend Biden on it. Even when there were some missteps, I still wanted to be able to defend him because there's something inside of me that wanted to say at least he did this right. Now, he did make the decision to leave Afghanistan, which I agree with, but just as more details came out about how horribly this was handled, it makes me wonder why these people still have jobs. I mean, I already knew. I mean, and then Millie brought, I think it was either Millie or Mackenzie that said this, but the Taliban offered to allow us to have, well, I mean, they allow us whatever, but to allow us to have the entire city of Kabul until we got everybody out. And they said, and I think it was Mackenzie who said, no, we just want the airport. That was a horrible idea because obviously people need to travel through the city to get to the airport so we can get them out. And when you leave the Taliban in charge, they get to control who comes in and out. I couldn't believe that he said no to that. And just the fact that the administration prioritized the deadline of leaving over getting people out first boggles my mind. I will never understand that thinking. Also, the fact that
you understand that thinking. It's called political optics. And that's the problem. Because we've seen this in American politics for years. Wars are fought through the optics of the American media just as much as it's fought on battlegrounds. And that's problematic. And this seems to be another example of that.
Yeah. And then even in that instance, it still boggles my mind that they didn't think how badly this would look if we leave people behind. Like even the plan that Trump had out, it was more concerned about getting people out first rather than adhering to a timeline. So the fact that Biden and his team couldn't see how badly that could impact them politically if they favor the deadline over the evacuation, people are still left behind, and it's making them look horrible, and they deserve all the criticism they're getting.
Well, the worst part.
Go ahead,
worst
go
part,
ahead, Metzler.
yeah, the worst part about this too, relative to the airport, why in the hell would you choose Kabul International Airport instead of flying them out of the Air Force Base? It made no sense. If they were being flown out of Bagram, you already had all American, everything you needed there. So essentially, you send them into the path of death and destruction to get to essentially a commercial airport. What?
which
What?
is never going to have the security that you need to keep people safe. And as a result, what transpired? We had a
Yeah,
terrorist attack.
yeah, because you have to travel through the streets where the killers are. I don't know.
But AJ, Jeff brings up an interesting point, which is, they should have known that leaving people behind was going to have a political cost. But then the question can be asked, we're in summer / early fall of 2021. Is there really going to be a political cost November of 2022 for what happened in Afghanistan? Because people could say, well, yeah, Benghazi cost Hillary Clinton. I would say not going to Michigan cost Hillary Clinton a lot more than Benghazi did. So if you look at what happened this year, is there really going to be a political consequence for Biden and the Democrats and the administration next year?
Well, I think this is something conservatives are going to have to continue to bring up as long as there are Americans still there. And we have to keep in mind that right now the Biden administration is going to be basically giving aid to the Taliban in order to help them behave, basically. So, we were there for 20 years. We left in a hurry. We left Americans there. And now we're going to be paying the Taliban for who knows how long. So I think this is a big enough issue that it should affect the primaries. And even, 3 years from now, if conservatives keep it up until every American is brought home. And keep in mind, too, I was having a discussion in my class the other day where my professor said he doesn't understand this because normally progressives are all about women. And how could Biden leave all these women in Afghanistan who now may not be able to get education? They're using apps to safely walk through streets because they don't know, they want to share places where women are commonly attacked and raped. And, how could Biden have left the women? And the children? You saw pictures of planes full of men, leaving Afghanistan. That totally goes against what we thought progressive ideals are. So there's a lot of issues within this one scenario that should not be left alone and should continue to be communicated. The fact that Biden said he wasn't going to get Americans out first, and now there are Americans left. There's so much that he gave conservatives to use in an election cycle. And if they're smart, they'll use it. And it will definitely be a problem.
Dr. Metzler, though, is this more an issue of fog of war? Maybe not going against political ideals, but more a fog of war than anything else and just being disorganized. But then, of course, the argument would be if these things happen, as AJ described, because it was fog of war, isn't the pushback to that, well, wait a minute, if anybody's going to be immune to the fog of war, it's the dude that's been in office in the federal government since 1973.
Well, yeah. And there's the other part of this, which is they've already started the messaging on it, in which he said, we'll get out all Americans who want to leave. And they said, by the way, the Americans who've been left behind, they can leave. The problem is that their families, in some cases, don't have the proper paperwork. So when their families get the proper paperwork, they can leave. That is the message that they have already started.
But aren't there certain Afghans that don't have the proper paperwork that got on those planes?
Well, yeah, there is. But he's going to say, and Anita Dunn has already started the spin, which is they didn't have we're happy to get them out at any time. The question has to be then, okay, get them the proper papers. I don't understand. But
Especially since the Afghanistanis that are going to be here in America are getting $6 billion in relocation expenses in the upcoming reconciliation bill.
Well, and before we
But
even
we're
get
turning
to,
away Haitians.
yeah, and before
Right.
we even get to the stopgap measure that was passed by the House of Representatives, by the way, will give the Afghani refugees real ID. Well, of course, once they have real ID, they can register to vote. So there you go.
Yeah, so let's transition real quick before we end the show. I want to bring up a logo and a movement that I know has stirred passions for years on this show. And I don't want anybody getting tearful or emotional when I show this, but there it is.
Yeah.
There it is.
She's off the plantation.
Off the plantation, Miss Brittany.
Oh my gosh. Holy cow. Please tell me it's not a Democratic plantation that she's off, because then that would be a completely different topic for the rest of the show.
Her dad probably votes Democrat, so.
Yeah.
There
we go. The Free Britney movement. Her dad is no longer part of her team that's helping her oversee her affairs. This is something that, for whatever reason, people saw as being their cause of choice for the last couple of years. Any thoughts on this? Because I mean, there's obviously a bigger story and a real human story and a real issue about legality, this, that, and the other. But in another regard, folks, it's like, why are we making a big deal out of, again, another celebrity issue when you have a pandemic that's still going on? The unemployment numbers are coming back out soon. They were not good last month. The economy seems like it might be stalling. You know, we're going into flu season, which, by the way, COVID's still around. We don't know if we're going to start going back to schools closing down, and we still are having these racial issues. Why do so many people care about Britney Spears, Jeff? Why?
I don't know. But here's
why are you laughing? I'm being serious.
I can't help it. It's hilarious. It's really not funny, because here's the thing. What I was hoping that this story would do, because there's probably some positives that will come out of it, not just for Britney, but I think it also brought awareness to the fact that this stuff happens in the first place. There's no way that Britney Spears is the only one who this whole situation has happened to. So maybe it could bring more awareness around that. I mean, maybe there's other men and women who are in similar situations, and hopefully that, these rulings and the publicity might give them a way out. Other than that, I'm not really sure why. I mean, it's an interesting story, but I think it's okay to focus on stories like these from time to time, because, with all the doom and gloom that's out there, that is legitimate. We need a break sometimes.
Yeah, and I think
AJ, well, go ahead, Dr. Metzler. Go ahead with your thoughts, because you know that Jeff has a T-shirt business that has the hashtag Free Britney on it that he's trying to make some money off of. So,
I invented it.
I think there is the doom and gloom aspect, so people want to get away from it. But leftists will probably say this is akin to missing white woman syndrome.
Yeah.
Look for that.
AJ, please say something before we leave, because we go ahead, AJ, because we got to go. What do you got to chime in on this that's going to up what Jeff said or Dr. Metzler said, if you dare?
I mean, I could never beat it, but I grew up, against my very strict Christian parents' desires, loving Britney Spears. And so I think the thing that was so crazy about it was just how inhumane in some ways some of the aspects of this case were. The fact that she had to wear an IUD, she couldn't get married, she couldn't spend her own money, she had to basically take care of her family and give them money. She didn't have any say in that. And it's probably in some people's minds a larger feminism story, probably, how these male conservators and these, midwives from The Handmaid's Tale, of which are her mom and her sister, were kind of holding her hostage. It was just an interesting story, I guess.
And let me say this before we go, because I think this is what really tipped it off, and you hit this nail right on the head. People can understand, well, she's a little off, we'll control her money so she's not broke. She's a little off, we'll control her money so she doesn't get into drugs. We'll control her money so she doesn't spend, money on $500,000 cars and she doesn't have a license. What do you mean you made her go get an IUD and she seems to be sane? That when that came out, that seemed to be the line of, oh, so whoa. And that kind of crossed a lot of different lines with, I mean, that started getting in the pro-life, pro-choice, the feminist movement when it comes to the pro-abortion positions that you hear in America. Couple that with, man, that seems to go really, really far. How old is she now? She's 35. Little Britney Spears is 35. She's 37. And that kind of seems to be the thing, AJ, to your point, that kicked everybody into gear to getting involved in it. So,
agreed.
Anywho, Jeff, we got to go. And I know that you want to hawk your T-shirts with Free Britney while you can, because that hashtag is going to die off. By the way, the hashtag that Dr. Metzler started way back when. What do you got going on this week, Mr. Charles?
I've got some interesting interviews coming up about various issues. So, and one of them even might involve the WWE. That'll be a first for me. Usually I talk about politics, but stay tuned. The conversation I think I'm going to have with my guest, I think it's going to be very interesting and maybe even a little depressing if you were into wrestling as a kid. Well, on a fresh perspective.
Because he's interviewing me and I get to talk about what I look like in a wrestling outfit and tights. And that is certainly depressing at 49.
That's not depressing. That's terrifying.
Well,
yeah. How can we unsee that? Really?
I'm like fighting to not visualize it.
And it's so hard for you to do. Oh. AJ, you follow that up. What you got going on this week?
This week I am taking off because my birthday is next week.
Happy
and
birthday.
I'll be turning 30. Yes. So this will be a relaxing week for me.
Sweet.
I don't have a joke. You said you're turning 30. I just want to be like, oh, that's all I gotta say. I remember 30. Dr. Metzler, you remember 32. It's in the rearview mirror like it is for me.
Very rare view.
There you go. What are you doing this week? And happy birthday to you, AJ.
Yeah, just continuing to do my work with economic development in New York City. So that's it.
Oh, I'm just handling billions of dollars. That's all. AJ has a birthday blowout. She's turning 30. Jeff is going to be this celebrity online, and Dr. Metzler's messing with billions of dollars. And I'm going around in a wrestling outfit, tights and all, with the boots up to your knees. It's just fantastic. Anywho, we're going to leave you with that this week because that's what Jeff told me to say. And it's in the teleprompter because we always
we all have a teleprompter.
Exactly. And a script, and we have production meetings. Anywho, AJ Swinson, thank you so much for joining us this week as a guest host here on Red and Black. Folks, we always enjoy you being here. Continue to tune in. You know where to find us online. Follow us on Twitter. Follow us on Instagram. Share the word in regards to what we're doing on YouTube. We're looking forward to expanding the platform, and we're looking forward to expanding our audience. Thank you for joining us. We'll catch up to you soon. TCNGB. Take care and God bless. Peace.